Record. All right, I'm going to hit start. Welcome, everyone. We're going to kick it off in a few minutes so that we're able to end on time. We'll allow some more attendees to come into the Zoom world, and then we will kick it off.
Hey, Demetria, good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Hello, thank you. Glad to be here.
We're just having people, all the attendees join, so everyone just sit tight for a moment and we'll get to it.
What's good, Sarah? The bros are in the building.
I'm trying to find the mute button. Hey, you guys. Hey. Represent.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right, I think it's safe to go ahead and kick it off. So welcome, everyone. And welcome to our wonderful EV owners who we will introduce here in a little bit. But my name is Shakaya. I am a program associate with Generation180, and I am joined here with my colleagues Stuart and Nessa, who's in the background running tech for us. And so thank you everyone for joining. This Ask an EV Owner is going to be dedicated to pledge signers. So this is individuals across America who have pledged that when they're in the market to purchase a new car, it will be an electric vehicle. And so we have some of our friends here that are going to answer your questions about what it's like to transition to an EV. So next slide. So Generation180 is a national nonprofit, and we work to inspire and equip individuals to take action on clean energy. Next slide. I think you're on mute, Stuart.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Shakaya. Oh, and we do that through three main programs. There's Flip the Energy Script, where instead of climate doom and gloom, we talk about clean energy optimism. We have Solar for All Schools and electric school bus programs that help school electrify their rides and get energy from the sun. And then we have the Electrify Your Ride and Electrify Your Life programs that help folks make their next car electric and electrify their homes. Next slide.
So you might be wondering why an electric car, right? So there's a couple reasons. It's fun to drive. It reduces air and noise pollution. And it actually saves money on gas and maintenance bills. And so as we mentioned, folks that are attending today have pledged that their next vehicle will be an electric. And so you've taken that first step. And then there's some other great facts as well. Like for instance, American Lung Association reported that a widespread transition to EVs will help avoid more than $72 billion in public health costs in the US by 2050. Some other quick facts are the lifetime ownership cost for cost for electric cars, which will decrease over time compared to in ICE, which is an internal combustion engine vehicle. So with most EVs offering savings between $6,000 to $12,000 to date. And right here, since we have many of our attendees here, I know some of them may already be EV owners and some may have just only signed the pledge. So we want to launch a poll question around, have you purchased an electric car since you've signed the pledge. So we're going to take a few seconds and launch this poll. Give me one moment. All right, just a few more seconds to allow folks to finish up the answers. Okay, so good response rate based on the attendees that are here with us today. So about 78% responded, and about 55% of them are reporting that they have purchased a EV since signing our pledge. 36% reported that they haven't purchased an EV yet, but they're still doing research and are likely to do it within the next year. And then 9% have reported not yet and aren't quite sure when they'll purchase that EV, which is fine. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow. It doesn't have to happen next month. It's just when you're ready to be in the market to purchase that car. Next slide. So a little bit more context around EVs. So currently the US market share of EVs account for 6%. To date. In 2022, it was reported that the average range for an EV was 300 miles. And there's so many more varieties to date from when EVs started popping up more. And so for some of you that are on the call, you might be wondering, what's an electric vehicle versus a plug-in hybrid? And I know at Gen180, we get this question. So for some that are ready to kind of jump in and purchase an EV, and then there's others that are kind of still researching and feel that maybe a plug-in hybrid is best for them until they're ready for that full EV. And so an electric vehicle is essentially a vehicle that has a battery instead of that gasoline tank, and an electric motor instead of the internal combustion. A plug-in hybrid electric vehicle is going to be your vehicle that has a combination. So it has both that gasoline and electric battery. And these vehicles also have that gasoline tank as well as the internal combustion engine, but you can plug in. So for some of our ambassadors that are driving a plug-in hybrid currently, they're doing most of their driving on the charged battery instead of using that internal combustion engine portion of the car. And as I mentioned, the range around EVs are much higher. In fact, JD Power reported that more than 50% of all new car buyers are actually considering EVs this year. Next slide.
Yeah, and you often hear there's some classic barriers around getting into an EV, and one of those is price. But with the recent Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, you might have heard about, there was lots of new incentives for folks to make their next car electric. So if you're in the market for a new electric vehicle, you can get a tax incentive up to $7,500. For used EVs, up to $4,000. And many states also offer additional state incentives. So, make sure if you're in the market, new or used, that you take advantage of those incentives as you can. There's some restrictions based on where the car is made or the battery is made, but there's a lot of incentives out there. So make sure, do some homework. If you have questions, always feel free to reach out to Shakea, Nessa, or I, and we can help you with some of that stuff. All right, next slide.
All right, so we are going to get to the exciting part of this discussion, conversation, where we get to hear from the actual EV owners, because they are who matter tonight, including our pledge signers. So we would like to welcome you. We have here with us Lynn, we have Bob, we have Anne Marie, we have Andrea, Tori, and Demetria. Next slide. So while we have this discussion, and as we go through this discussion this evening, there is a Q&A section. I see some folks are already popping questions in there, great questions. So anytime throughout this discussion that you have a question, just continue to put it in the Q&A, or you're welcome to reach out to me after this discussion and for any feedback or questions for ongoing research. But we can go ahead and stop screen sharing and kick off the conversation. You want to take it over, Stuart?
Sure. All right. First question, and this is for everyone. You know, changing to an EV can be a big decision. What was the reaction of your friends or family when you started to drive electric? Were you no longer invited to family reunions, or were they like, "Hey, that is awesome. Would love to, will you take me for a ride around the block?" Would anyone like to share kind of what friends and family, how they responded?
I can start. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was well received by my family. Of course, my son had 3 electric vehicles before me, so he won the race there. But it was very warm welcoming from my family.
I can keep going. I was the first in my family to get an electric vehicle, and they were all very excited. They were also filled with questions, and they had to take turns driving it because all of them, it was the first time for them driving an electric vehicle and feeling that instant torque. So they were all very excited and very excited to get behind the wheel mainly. So I didn't drive it that much for the beginning because they would all steal it.
I'll echo that and say it's a lot more fun to drive than my Prius, and everybody really appreciated the acceleration and how much fun it is to drive, and also how quiet it is. So I got a very enthusiastic response right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think my reaction with my family is that I was the first one, and they wanted to take pictures with it, and they appreciated the quietness of the ride and the smoothness of the ride.
I'll go next. Yes, so I am the first EV owner of my family as well, and my family's reaction is, "Okay, yeah, you go ahead with that EV. I'm going to stick to the gas for now." But I think they're all starting to understand that the conversion is happening, and at least here in the state of California, they're aware that ICE vehicles will not be sold here within the next 7 to 10 years, and so they have to get used to it.
And I would say with Demetrius, I was the first also in my family, and no one was surprised because it sort of reflects my values. But the 2 things I think they were really curious about was I got the Volvo XC40, and it has vegan leather interior. So everybody wanted to see that. Everybody thought it was going to be gross and awful, but it's actually really awesome if you haven't experienced that. And then everybody wanted the speed. No one expects what happens when you hit that gas pedal or not gas pedal, accelerator. Yeah, and so that was kind of fun too. But I realized early on not to be in the passenger seat because your neck, like when someone doesn't expect it, so yeah.
Love that.
Nice. Okay, so another question for you all, and we can start with Bob and then popcorn from there. Where and when and how frequently do you charge your car?
Yeah, well, so that's actually one of the biggest misconceptions that people have, that charging is hard. Charging is actually way more convenient. So I'm in our particular situation, we have a garage. And so I installed a charger in our garage when we got our first of now 2 EVs. And every morning it's full. You get a full tank. So at home, I literally never go to the gas station. So that is a huge convenience improvement, as well as much cheaper when you use residential electricity rates. And on the road, we can talk about this more later. You can see in the background part of our EV road trip to all the national parks, 27,000 miles. with the, at least with the Tesla supercharger network, which now a lot of the other companies are moving towards, we didn't have any problem at all charging even on the road, both because the superchargers, we would usually stop for lunch, and the charging was usually done before we were done eating. And then at night, we would stay in hotels that had chargers, and there are more and more of those. And so it was the same thing as being at home. In the morning, the car was full. So we spent very little time charging. It was usually happening while we were sleeping or eating.
I would say the same. I do have a NEMA 1450 plug in my garage where I use my mobile connector to charge at home. And just like he said, I usually charge it at around 11 o'clock in the evening after I'm pretty much done with my day. By the time I go to the office or run my errands, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, I have a full charge or a 90% charge, because to me, a full tank is pretty much 90% of the capacity of my battery. And I drive a Tesla too, so the supercharging network has allowed me to basically drive, pretty much interstate, state to state, wherever I want to go. So I think as far as the charging infrastructure makes it a lot easier for you to take those drives that you may want to do to another state. And now, most of these utility companies, they have special plans to where you get different rates, for your electric vehicle. And that's definitely something that you may want to look at to see if that's feasible if you decide to get an electric vehicle as well.
I'd like to hop in as a non-Tesla driver and just say that was something a learning, part of the learning curve was figuring out that Walmart has Electrify America's fast chargers, and there's Walmarts everywhere. So at first I wasn't sure how all that would work, and I also had to kind of, my car would say, either it would prompt me, hey, do you want me to find a charging station nearby? Or usually I'm more proactive than that. I'll ask it to find one along my route. And so it does that. And then it gives you a list of the chargers that you're going to pass. And then you can decide, like there's certain, like Blink tends to be slower chargers. I learned that the hard way. So I look for the Electrify America, because those will have the fast chargers. They're almost always at Walmart, sometimes at Sheetz. So the car kind of makes it easy. Also, I don't have to do a whole lot of work to figure out where to charge. And I do have a charge. I don't have a garage, but I have a 240 outlet on the side of my house I had installed when I bought the car. And so I don't charge every night. I charge maybe once a week when I'm not traveling anywhere. Like I can go all around town and up and down everywhere. And I keep my car between 20 and 90%. That's what Volvo recommends. I don't know about other cars.
And same with Tesla as far as the battery capacity is concerned. I have a Tesla, and I also do not have a home charging receptacle. And so I use the supercharger network, and it's actually quite convenient for me. I guess maybe I've just adjusted my lifestyle around charging, which is fine. I mean, I'll go to Target or a restaurant or something like that and plug in while I'm eating or shopping. So it's not like it's a waste of time. And even if I don't have a place to go, I could do some work in my car, and that's what I do. So I take advantage of the time I have while I'm charging to do things that are productive. So it doesn't seem like it's such an interruption in my life. I've just been able to adapt. It works for me.
Yeah, I could say that I charge most of the time at home. I have a level 2 charger. I charge from about 9:30 every night off peak hours. I have a sweet deal in that I generate my own electricity. I'm a net positive home. I have PV solar on my home. So I have no charge now to operate that vehicle. So it's really great. My charging experience with fast DC chargers is when I picked up the vehicle. I picked it up out of state in Colorado and drove it to Arizona. So it was about 1,000 miles. It was a great experience. The other sweet deal during that trek was that Electrify America had free charging for the 2-day trip I took. So again, no cost to me, and it was a great experience. And just to try a level 2 charger, I stopped at a hotel. Some hotels have a level 2 charger and did a slower charge overnight. So good experience.
I'll just add that most hotels that have chargers, it's usually free. So that's another advantage, because of course they want to bring in customers. So that's another advantage when you're on a road trip, of taking advantage of free charging at hotels.
I'll tell you, one of my experiences was I could look on my app when I was going to bed at the hotel and saw that they had not plugged my car in. So I called down to the front desk. I'm like, can you make sure they plug in my car so it's ready to go in the morning? And right away, somebody plugged it. So
I kind of have a similar situation in which I have a level 2 charger at home. So I'm able to, get the car to its 100% or 80% on a daily basis or when needed. I also have a Tesla Model Y. The range is about 300 miles. I tend to have long-ish trips. I visit my parents quite a bit. I live in Texas, so it's a big state. For me, it's a 5-hour drive, so I have to stop at least halfway through for a charge. And that was one of my biggest concerns when getting a Tesla. Am I going to be able to make it, or where can I charge? But at least the Tesla network is so easy that as soon as you input your destination, it tells you which locations are nearby, how much percentage you'll have when you arrive to that destination, how many available blocks are in that destination, so you don't even have to wait. And honestly, it's 20 minutes. By the time I, walk around and grab something to eat or use the restroom, my car's charged and I'm ready to go. So it doesn't really take much more time than a regular car.
That's great. And it's a great segue, the average commute, the average daily mile of Americans is like 30 miles a day. So like Shakay was saying, the average of EVs in 2022 in the United States that were sold, the average range was 300 miles. So more than enough for your daily use. But some of you have alluded to stories about taking longer trips. And has it prevented you from going to visit your grandparents, or are you still able to take those trips if you need to? It sounds like it's kind of there's a little bit of fun or adventure involved, but has it prevented you from going to where you wanted to go driving an EV?
Go ahead, sorry.
No worries. I was gonna say not at all. As a matter of fact, I just took a trip 2 weeks ago. I live in Atlanta. So I just took a trip 2 weeks ago to Tampa, Florida, for my son. He runs track for a track meet down there. I can say the only difference is versus an ICE vehicle is, your trip may take about maybe 30 to 45 minutes longer, depending on how many stops you have to make as far as charging or, taking a health break or anything like that. So no, I mean, my car is my daily driver. I've taken that car everywhere. If I want to drive to Texas or California, I'll make that drive in that car. So no, not at all.
I mentioned that we took a road trip to all the national parks last year, 27,000 miles.
Wow.
And we went to some of the most remote places in the country. And you'd be surprised at how there are chargers in different places. We actually got the idea for the trip when we were in Boulder, Utah, population about 250 on a previous trip. And there's 4 chargers here in the middle of nowhere. So they're all over the place. And the fast chargers are more and more frequent. As I mentioned, hotels typically often have chargers. And even when there aren't chargers, there's actually ways to charge, because the secret is that electricity is ubiquitous. So we've stayed in hotels where we charged off of just a regular outside plug with the manager's permission if their charger wasn't working. We've also, when we were in some of the really remote places, we used RV campsites that typically have electrical hookups, and they're 240 volt hookups. So they are just as good as a regular overnight charger. And in the background there, if you can see, you can actually charge even when there's no grid, because that's Big Bend, Texas, one of the most remote and desolate places we went to. And they had a solar setup. They were operating totally off the grid and had a solar setup with batteries, and they had a 240 volt hookup for us, and it worked great every night. So between the fast charger networks, level 2 chargers at hotels, and other places where you can just plug into some outlet, it's really not a problem to go essentially anywhere in my experience.
That's awesome. There's an old saying that ownership cures range anxiety. It's other experiences. Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in because you mentioned Big Bend, Texas, and there's a question here about living in urban cities. I am actually in Southern Texas, very urban city, very underdeveloped as well. And you will find chargers in the most random of places. There's no such thing as range anxiety, because honestly, there are grocery stores, hotels all around with charging locations.
Yeah, I've had some friends that were in remote locations, and they even went to a welding shop because they have 240 volts there. Just need an adapter, and you're okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I would definitely say that the infrastructure is growing. And so the concern about running out of juice before you get to your destination has really gone away. I mean, yeah, grocery stores, Walmart, Target, the Tesla charging network is quite abundant. And at least, well, I should say the Bay Area. I'm in California, so they're everywhere. You don't have to go far without running into one, but I'm sure that it's the same as well in other states. I actually just returned from Birmingham, Alabama. I drove an EV, a Polestar 2, my first time, from the Atlanta airport to Birmingham and Alabama. There were charging stations all along the route. There were no concerns that I had about finding a location to charge. And so I'm sure that that's the case in other regions of the country as well, as the infrastructure continues to grow.
That's awesome. And the federal government is even making a big investment through something called the IIJA, where they're committing to adding 500,000 fast chargers across the country in every state in the next 5 years. So, more and more chargers to come.
We should say that there's good news here on the movement among a lot of the auto companies towards a single charging standard, which has been one of the bugaboos, is that there's two main charging standards between the superchargers of Tesla and the so-called CCS for many of the other makers. And more of the automakers are now adopting the supercharger standard, which is called the North American Charging Standard, or NACS. And if the rest of the dominoes fall, then we have the prospects for being able to fast charge at any charger with any EV in the future, which would be a huge plus for EV ownership.
For sure.
Thank you.
Great. So a lot of you talked about not having that range anxiety, or not having the inaccessibility to find a charging station when traveling or just in your local commute. But were there any other challenges or disappointments that you found as you made the transition as to an EV owner? I know we get a lot of questions about, like, can you actually drive the car in the winter? Is the car still drivable in the summer when it's really hot? So can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll go. I think, well, besides what you just said, of course, when it comes to, I'm sorry about that. When it comes to EVs, particularly in the climate that you're in, that can affect your range. So I would say, if you're in New York and it's winter and, it's below freezing or whatever, you got to keep that in mind, that does eat up a lot of your range or your battery. Same thing when it's hot, because you're using a lot of the AC. You have to understand it's not just your driving, it's pretty much your driving conditions and your driving habits, how fast you're going, whether or not you listening to the radio, you got the AC pump and things of that nature does impact your range to your destination. So just keep that in mind. But I think honestly, it's not anything that you mentioned. The thing for me was, at least for Tesla, was I didn't have a spare tire. So when when I bought my car, I was actually surprised that didn't have a spare tire, and that just took something to get used to, that I need to be extra careful, especially when you're driving in the city and there's a lot of potholes and things of that nature. I need to be extra careful so I don't blow a tire. And I've owned my car for 4 years, and knock on wood, I haven't had that issue. So, but that was the only significant change for me.
I'll jump on that and just say I've never had range anxiety, but I have also had tire anxiety because of that spare tire issue, especially with some of these gravel roads like at Big Bend. That would have been a problem if we'd had a flat. So I would say the two things that are somewhat concerns with EVs are, first, although my car, which is a Tesla, is 300 plus rated range, at super high highway speeds, you do not get that much range. The speed really eats up range. So it's the same thing for an internal combustion engine. Speed uses a lot more energy, but you're not going to get the advertised range if you're going 75, 80 miles an hour, which is very common on the highways these days. So just know that. And so, from my point of view, a little bit more range would be nice, but 300 is enough. The other thing is that the batteries do have some degradation over time. Depends on how you manage it. That's why a number of the people here mentioned you don't want to charge it all the time routinely, when you're not going on trips, to manage the battery health. So you're going to lose, single digit percentages of the battery capacity over the first few years. It then tends to level off, is what the data show. But you're going to lose some battery capacity. It's not going to die, and they all have warranties, but you're going to lose a little bit. So that, combined with the loss of range at high speeds, are the two things that I would cite as the little issues.
Bob, I'm afraid to ask you how you define high speeds. We can talk offline.
It wasn't me. I was just keeping up with the traffic.
One thing to mention is that most of the cars now have regenerative braking. So that definitely helps with, some sort of that range anxiety, or sometimes if you are driving smartly, you can really use the most of that range. Really something to get used to, especially in Teslas. When you start using the regenerative braking, you basically stop using the brake altogether, and you just accelerate and kind of use one pedal instead of the two that we're used to. That's at least something I've gotten used to. And now when I drive gas vehicles, it's very weird for me to have to use both. That's just something to mention. And I haven't felt the range drop down. I live in Texas where it's very hot, so I haven't felt any sort of range diminishing from the heat. However, I know that in the winter, especially in northern states, that could severely impact, just because it needs to heat up to the point where it's going to charge, and in cold temperatures that just takes longer. But that's it.
Yeah, I was curious.
Go ahead.
Tori talked about his car being 4 years old. I don't know how old Bob or Andrea's are, but my car is 6 months old, and I have actually played around with, does the air conditioning degrade the battery and things like that, and I have not noticed a difference. So it could be just because newer battery, but also like Andrea. So the Volvo allows you to change modes where you can do the one pedal driving versus a traditional, more what you're used to from a gas car. And I just decided right out of the gate to just put it into the EV mode and just use the one pedal, because that is more efficient. And I just decided to just get used to it, and I love it. So.
Yeah, I personally use the eco mode. We have a Kia EV6 GT line, and it's fast enough in the eco mode. I'm more about range. When you want to have fun, just switch it over to normal or sports mode. I'm in southern Arizona, actually a few hundred miles away from the sunniest place in the US. So heat is something I have to be mindful of. I keep my car in the garage all the time. When we were shopping around, I was surprised how many modern high-end EVs had the panoramic roof, which I didn't want because I don't want to overheat the car and have to use the energy to cool it down. So I was happy with our choice. It does have some glass, but it's minimal with insulating shade inside. So that helps us out here.
Thanks for that. And just to highlight, a lot of gas cars don't come with a spare tire anymore either. So that's not just an EV phenomenon. Supposedly or factually, EVs have many fewer moving parts than a gas car. There's no spark plugs, there's no exhaust pipe, there's no timing belt. So they say that the cost of ownership and maintenance is much less than a gas car. Have you all found that to be true? Are you saving money on maintenance and service and not going to Jiffy Lube type of experiences?
Definitely. As I mentioned, the 27,000-mile road trip, no oil change, no tune-up. If you did that in a gas car, you'd want to do what, 3 or 4 oil changes going that mileage. And there are many fewer parts to break. So you don't have a radiator, you don't have pollution controls, it's a much simpler, electric motor, much simpler, fewer parts and more reliable than internal combustion engines. So definitely much less maintenance. In fact, the only maintenance issue we had with our car in that road trip was the bugs in the West were so bad that we had to stop at a couple of car washes to clean the bugs off the front of the car.
EVs are heavy because of the battery, and because of that and the torque, you're going to go through tires a little bit faster. I had a high-end ICE, internal combustion sports car, and that went through because I had a lot of torque, went through tires as well, but that's something to be mindful of.
Yeah, I'm with Lynn there. I go through tires, but I average 25,000 miles a year. So just so you can get an idea how many miles I have total. But yeah, that's the one thing I spend a lot of money on every year. That's about, which is still nothing compared to, say, if I drove an ICE vehicle, I would have to constantly get oil changes, air filter changes, everything, maybe fuel, water pump, something's going on with the radiator. So, at least when I recall having my ICE vehicle, I was spending about $25,000 to $3,000 a year in maintenance costs. And I guess I'll spend as little as anywhere from 200 to like maybe $1,000 in maintenance costs with my vehicle. So yeah, and it's mostly through the tires and either tire rotation or a wheel alignment when I switch out the tire. That's pretty much it.
Others, any maintenance issues since you've been driving? Have you saved money?
I've been owning the car much like Anne-Marie mentioned, kind of like 6-7 months. It's been a new purchase this year, so it's fairly new at the moment. I haven't had to have any sort of maintenance or haven't had to take it in for support whatsoever. It's been cruising, at least for now.
Same for me, just tire changes, buy new tires for me, aside from a fender bender, but that's,
Not the car's fault. Yeah.
But no, other than that, no, just the tires.
Awesome, love that.
Great. So I think we have time for one more question. And we would love to hear, being that you all are EV owners, and there are other EV owners on the call, as well as non-EV owners, how can existing EV owners help increase EV adoption?
Give test drives. Once you drive it, you get hooked. And like Andrea said, the one pedal driving is fantastic. Once you get used to it, you can never go back. And the thing that's so great about it is it's not just the acceleration, it's the responsiveness. So like if you're passing on the highway or entering a entrance ramp, the car just zooms forward and it doesn't change gears, back and forth. And when you let up on the accelerator, it slows down. It doesn't keep barreling forward because of the regenerative braking. So get people in those cars to test drive them or rent one. Hertz has a lot of EVs, and so you can rent one to try one out as a great experience for a few days.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. And I would also say just showing how much you're spending to operate the vehicle, say in a given week, especially with gas prices as high as they are now, at least in California. I don't think I've seen anything lower than $4 a gallon. And most people commute, I think it's an average of 30 miles one way. And so to think about the expense of gas versus the expense of operating an EV, I think could push someone over the fence.
Yeah, I personally participate in Earth Day events, National Drive Electric Week. I also, I'm on a panel with the people at the community college EV orientation, so we're there to answer any questions. It's a non-credited course, but we bring our EVs there. We ask some people from the chapters to bring there, so we have a real mix of brands out there, and they get to ask their questions.
If I can add one more, I would urge anybody who's concerned about finding chargers to check out PlugShare. It's basically the wiki of chargers, and it's an incredible amount of information. Essentially, every charger in the country is on PlugShare. And that's what they did when I bought my Nissan Leaf, which had 2014 very limited range. And I was concerned about that. And the guys at the dealership said, download PlugShare or look on their website, and you'll see how many chargers there are around. And a lot of the questions in the Q&A have been about finding chargers. And so I urge anybody who's thinking about an EV and concerned about that to check out PlugShare. It'll alleviate a lot of your concerns about how many chargers there are in your area.
When I was on my first 1,000-mile trip, being new to EVs, I found out that the chargers I found on PlugShare, which I love as well, they actually have 24/7 phone service. So you can call ahead to check on the maintenance of the charger you're coming up to. So you're minimizing any surprises. So I had just a great experience on that trek.
Love these, great insight. Final lightning round question in the few minutes we have left. Yes or no? Unless you really feel passionate about additional context. You're all driving EVs now. Your next car, is it also going to be an electric vehicle? Andrea, you going to go back to gas, or are you stuck with your EV?
I'm stuck with the EV. I came from a Jeep, and there's no way I'm switching back. And one thing I did want to mention, because I think we can all agree, education is the most important part of it for all the people that are on the edge and they're not necessarily sure. And there's just so many myths out there about pricing being more than a regular car. I think the most important thing is, get out there and start researching. There's all sorts of stuff like resources, podcasts, everything you can imagine. And honestly, they are not that much more expensive than a regular gas-powered car. You can find them pretty much in the same price range, used or not used. And a used EV is not going to be any lesser quality than a new EV whatsoever. So definitely get out there, and it's worth giving it a try. There's plenty of websites that will, allow you to look for EVs that fit your needs as far as range. And if you have a big family, there are plenty that fit a lot of people. And I have 2 dogs. Mine fits 2 dogs without a problem.
That's awesome. Len, you gonna have an EV for your next car?
I'm sorry, it's going to be a solar EV, the one behind me.
Fair enough. Anne-Marie, electric vehicle for your next car?
Oh yeah, but probably not anytime soon. Hopefully this car will last a long time. And by the way, one of the things, like Andrea said, lots of myths out there. Oh, the batteries, they're so expensive if they die. Well, Volvo at least has 100,000-mile warranty on the batteries last as long as a regular gas engine lasts. So anyway, yeah, lots of myths out there.
Bob, EV next car?
Oh, absolutely. It would be inconceivable for me to go back. And in fact, not just cars, but all my machines are going to be electric from now on. Everything we replace with electric and powered with clean. We also have solar panels And that's the solution to the climate crisis. And it doesn't just solve the problem of warming climate, it also gives you a better life in every way you can imagine. Healthier, better performance, less noise, just better in every way. So I ain't buying any more ICE engines of any kind for anything.
Love that. Tori, how about you? Sticking with electric vehicle?
Man, I'm never going back.
All right, Demetria, last word. You sticking with EV?
Oh, EV for sure. I'm not going back either.
Love that.
Yes.
So that's our time tonight. I just want to say thank you to all our EV owners that joined tonight. Thanks to everyone that joined, everyone that signed the pledge. Hey, there's still 2 more months in our National Going Electric Pledge campaign and sweepstakes. One lucky pledge signer will win an electric Ford F-150 Lightning. So share that. I'm rooting for you all, each individually. I hope you all win. And just again, want to say thank you. Have a great night. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Shakay and that's all right. Yeah, Andrea.
Actually, before we all drop off, do you mind if I just give a quick little announcement for everyone out there looking for an EV?
Do it. Yeah, totally.
So, well, I work for a company called EV Universe. So if you are looking for an EV as your next step, if you sign the pledge, I highly recommend checking it out just because it is the widest online search for EVs. So if you want to get started, maybe that's the perfect place for anyone in the audience.
All right, you heard it from Andrea. Go check out EV Universe. That's awesome. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Stuart.
Totally. And great to see you all. Have a good weekend. Keep cool. It's been hot, so keep cool and hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Stuart, can you put in a couple extra entries for me? My middle son really wants to win that F-150.
I'm rooting for you, Bob.
Okay.
Bye.